Hello and welcome to Monocle on Culture. I'm Robert Bound. On today's show, we're hearing from the beloved American film director and auteur Richard Linklater. Linklater's slew of small-budget, big fan-base indie movies such as Dazed and Confused, the Before trilogy and Boyhood have cemented his status as a movie maker extraordinaire. And that's not even mentioning smash hits at the box office like School of Rock. Well, Linklater's latest film, on its surface, diverges from the quieter coming-of-age themes that he's mostly known for. Hitman is a comedic thriller starring, and indeed a star turn from, Glen Powell. It's a riotous modern twist on the screwball genre and a lot of fun. As well as hearing from Linklater himself, we'll catch up with Monocle on Culture regular Hannah Strong for her take on whether Hitman is indeed a hit. Stay tuned, that is all coming up. Hitman tells the story of Gary Johnson, a tale that was first told by writer Skip Hollandsworth in Texas Monthly back in 2001. Mild-mannered Gary is a college professor and does stints helping out the police with their tech on sting operations. Well, everything changes one day when he's asked to fill in for a cop posing as a hitman. Gary realises he's an expert at embodying the person someone's dreamed up when they've searched out the services of a hitman, aided by some camp new outfits and disguised voices. But things get heated when he dissuades potential client Madison from taking out a hit on her abusive husband and begins to fall for her himself. In the following clip, you'll hear the voice of Gary as he reflects on his new vocation, and the second voice is also Gary's under the guise of one of his many hitman aliases.
You know, I was always too shy to go out for the high school play, but I had somehow found my stage, and each arrest was like a standing ovation.
We're about to go into the deep end of the pool here. This is serious. If I take this envelope and leave, this time tomorrow, her head is in a Winn-Dixie bag. The rest of her's pig slop and Opelousas. Now be absolutely clear with me. Is that what you want?
Now, as well as directing and producing the movie, Richard Linklater co-wrote the screenplay alongside Glen Powell. Monocle on Culture producer Sophie asked him about this and much more when she met Linklater while he was on a recent visit to London. Over to you, Sophie.
Richard, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Of course.
On this beautiful spring day in London.
Of course, it is. Beautiful.
Congratulations on Hitman. It is such an exciting, funny film.
Oh,
it's quite
thank
sexy
you.
As well.
Yeah, don't forget sexy.
It's really fantastic. And I imagine I'm going to start where most people have started these interviews, which is the initial inspiration, which is an article in Texas Monthly about the real life Gary Johnson. But it came out quite a while ago, 2001.
Yeah.
When you read it, did you just immediately know you wanted to make a film out of this?
Kind of. I sort of love that character. I mean, who could think up this? You know, a guy who's a kind of a mild-mannered, quiet, introverted college instructor who also moonlights as a killer. You know, that's just kind of beautiful. A fake killer, like they all are. Hitmen don't exist in what people think they are. So, yeah, what a weird world, you know. Skip Hollandsworth, the writer, has such a nose for kind of true crime stories and crazy characters, strange environments, and darkly funny, you know. So, yeah, I called him up at that time, and we talked about it. But the reason it didn't become a movie over the years was just it was kind of the same thing over and over. He meets client, wants to kill someone. However funny and weird that is, it was just a repetition of that. It was only during the pandemic, Glen Powell called me up and we started talking about this. He had read the article all those years later and was excited about it. And I was excited just to talk to someone, to have a creative partner. And I was just in my own head with it, not thinking it totally worked as a movie. But the more we talked about it, we gave ourselves permission to kind of rock and roll with it, kind of go beyond just the story to kind of do a continuation. Skip's article ends when he lets her go, which is, well, you know, probably a third of the way through the movie, maybe.
Yeah.
So everything from then on is our little you know, thrill ride, I guess.
It's, yeah, you describe it as a somewhat true story.
Yeah, it's always hard to get the exact wording. Like, this is based on this true story, real true story, actual events. There's all these. It's kind of coy. I don't really trust it when I say this is a true story.
Yeah.
It's like, what is true? Can you really make anything true to what it was? It's all kind of. And this whole movie's about artifice. It's all myth and fake. This is all about something that doesn't exist. So we gave ourselves incredible latitude to just kind of continue with that story along those lines.
Yeah, totally. And I hadn't read the article before I watched the film, but then when I went back, there's so many nice elements which I was surprised to find out were in the true bit of the somewhat true story, like the pie line, which is so great. And it was so satisfying that was there in the original kind of source material.
Yeah, like who could make that up? People ask, like, who came up with that all pie is good pie line? I said, well, Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
Like, who could invent that? We had to get that in the movie,
And Gary Johnson sadly passed away before you could finish this film, but you did have some interactions with him ahead of that.
Yeah, we talked on the phone a number of times, and God, he was just such a beautiful soul, kind of I just call him a Zen master. He was like, hey, sounds good. Nothing was going to affect him. He was pretty chill. Like I described at the very end, chillest dude imaginable. I that's my wording based on the guy I knew,
And you mentioned there that you co-wrote the screenplay with Glen Powell. You've obviously had a long working relationship with him as an actor. How did you kind of know that he would also be the right sort of creative partner for this different sort of endeavor?
Well, sometime after he first called me up, we were talking about it. We were getting farther down the line about like, where could the story go? We were working on it, outlining. And I realized at some point, I just said, hey, Glenn, we should just write this together. It was really up to me to ask him, I guess, as the senior member here and the experienced screenwriter. I was kind of like, because it just saved me a step, I mean, we could do this and then we would rewrite it in like a workshop. Mm-hmm. I would be customizing it to you anyway. So let's just start now, which made all the sense in the world. So it was a fairly just effortless endeavor for both of us. It was just fun. We make each other laugh and we push each other in kind of fun ways too.
And it does seem like you have a lot of that fun kind of comes out on the screen. There's a really great montage of him dressing up as all these different kind of characters that he expects people are expecting from a hitman. What was that actually fun to do? Like how was that experience?
It's
like
as fun as it looks to play. I think actors like that, playing different parts. But the real Gary did that. He would change his appearance for the different, because again, it's all fake. It's like he's trying to be what they think a hitman is. But we know, since it's not even real, it's like you're into the pop culture. You're into the mythology of it all, which kind of is anything goes. We couldn't be too over the top there. So we had a lot of fun there. Glenn kind of went off the deep end with those never really landed until the day, like I'd seen pictures of them. We had the hair and the different wigs and he was still working on the accents and, it never really came fully into focus until we were shooting. So each one of those days was special. It was kind of the freak of the day.
And did he surprise you as an actor, seeing him kind of cycling through all those different roles in one movie?
Nothing Glenn can do would surprise me. It was just like the next level, the levels of, how weird and fun it got. So.
And elsewhere in the cast, we should talk about some of the other cast members, specifically Adria Arjona, who's incredible, got such charm, got such obvious chemistry with Glen Powell. What was the casting like for her? I imagine it was a pretty easy decision.
Yeah, you want to make a sexy thriller, you better have sexy. And I was worried about that going in, because if we didn't find her, what would we have? I knew the whole movie would hinge on that. So when I met Adria, kind of in an interview situation, I was really thrilled. I was like, oh my God, you're it.
Yeah.
It's a narrow range of what that could be, but man, she was it. And so I told Glenn, it's like, hey, I want you two to, meet and see what you think. I didn't want to, because, he's my creative partner. I didn't want to say, hey, I've cast the part.
Chosen it, yeah.
I wanted him to feel like he's a part of it, of course. It's a big decision. But yeah, it was great. They got together and just really hit it off. So I was like, okay, we're off to the races. I don't think you can create chemistry out of nothing. A lot of actors have it. I mean, two actors can have it together or they can not have it together. But there was never a doubt. I think it can be dissipated. It can't be, it can be nurtured. So they definitely have that. And we were real partners. Like even the sex scenes and stuff, we all talked, we all worked on them. Like, well, what do you think's sexy? What have we seen before? They're my creative partners. They'd bring in like photos and I think this is sexy, some wine and they're half dressed. I was like, yeah, let's make a scene around that. So we were all kind of in on that together.
And it's quite an interesting kind of roles for them to take, not just because Glen Powell is playing kind of two different, he's playing Gary Johnson, he's also playing Ron, who Adria's character initially kind of Madison falls for. But then when he kind of has to switch back to Gary, you still have to see the connection. It's not just a total kind of face. Yeah,
the audience is totally with Gary and his slow transformation to Ron. You have to see Gary always there a little bit. She's more of a mystery. We see her 100% from his point of view. So a lot goes on with her off screen. We never are with her without him.
Yeah.
It's not like a parallel thing. That was just a big choice I made really early. So, but she's a little more of a mystery. There was a lot to be filled in with her, particularly because Gary was a real guy. We're basing it off something real. Her was, kind of a different. We were kind of imagining a character, creating a character, and Adria came in and did such great work there. She was so perfect, just so smart and funny and charming and, everything she is. I was like, wow, kind of amazing to behold them.
Yeah.
The director sort of has front row seat, you're the first one to see their chemistry before you're even filming, you're rehearsing. I'm like, oh, wow, I think this is going to work.
Yeah, she's a real star. You can tell.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to ask you about genre as well. There's so much of it which feels like such a kind of modern, fun story with so many kind of modern elements, but it's got a real screwball comedy energy to it. How are you thinking about genre and sort of your kind of filmic knowledge and own sort of experience?
The foundation of this movie, once we really got into it, and I was thinking about it, I was like, God, it felt like a 40s film, not just like 40s film noir, like Double Indemnity, or I'd say, but also like Preston Sturges, Lady Eve, like the screwball comedies of that era. So I was like, yeah, that's what those are two of my favorite genres, to be having those bumping up against each other. But then when I say it's like more of a modern version, it's old fashioned, but old fashioned in like the 80s, maybe, where people had sex on screen. There was, it's like, oh, yeah. So old fashioned. It was, to me, it goes back to maybe the 80s, not really the 40s, the Hays Code 40s. But, that's the origin probably of these genres.
But without spoiling anything, there's a very sort of important scene with a mobile phone. So it's it's got like so many, I guess it's part of what makes it so engaging and fun to watch. It's bringing a lot of those different elements together. Yeah,
that's a modern twist for sure, just with the technology. But that scene evolved a lot. But man, that one, very important. That scene nails it. They're acting on several different levels there.
And I've heard you talk in other interviews about when you pick up a new film, being really interested in sort of how it will challenge you, or the kind of challenges that you have to kind of overcome within it, and how that makes it this sort of satisfying project. And I wonder with Hitman, what the kind of big challenge of the film or what it was trying to convey was.
Yeah, every film should kind of scare you a little bit. Like, oh gosh, how am I going to pull this off? How will this work? I think with Hitman, it was like, wow, to really make it both a comedy, this dark comedy that it is, but then also be truly, I really wanted the audience to be on the edge of their seat. Like, oh no, this got real fast, and it's dangerous, like, oh, this could go bad, to go really dark and scary too. So it was fun to kind of be in those genres and try to make that work, for this particular movie. So, I don't know. I think a filmmaker, you should be able to do anything, right? It's film. You love film. Just make it work. Even though that's not your typical genre, you should be able to get in there and, have fun with it.
And just finally to end up on picking up on that, you've had such success with films that cover so many different kind of genres and ideas, and you're known for lots of your kind of hangout movies, and this is definitely a thriller, as you say. It's very kind of exciting.
Sexy thriller.
Yeah, exactly. As I said at the beginning,
yes,
it is very
I'm
sexy.
kidding.
How do you see how all of your films fit together, or the themes that you think you're sort of constantly going back to again and again?
You know, it's nothing you ever think about consciously. I would never write some, oh, this is what I do. You know, it's just like, it just kind of comes out. You can't help but be yourself. And so I guess later, even as I realized he was this instructor, I was kind of going to town with some of his lectures and all that. I said, oh, here I go again. I'm making a sexy thriller, but then he's just musing about identity. And so a lot of these conversations could come out of one of my other more talky movies. But I was like, okay, well, but I think it's important information. I want the audience to know that, you know, so I don't know. We're sort of stuck with ourselves, but I guess that's the theme of the movie. Is Gary Johnson stuck with himself, or is he trying to be, you know, as much as I want to try to be different, you know, there's still a big percentage that you can't really get away from, maybe.
It's got the Linklater fingerprints on it for sure.
But that wasn't intentional. That's not like, oh, I can't do it and not have that. I was like, no, I'm always trying to do that. I'm trying to escape myself. It's just hard to do, I guess.
The great Richard Linklater there in conversation with Monocle on Culture producer Sophie Monaghan-Coombs. Now, Hannah Strong is a film critic and the digital editor at Little White Lies magazine. Hannah joined me in the studio to give her take on Hitman. I began by asking Hannah whether the frenetic film is actually one of Linklater's contemplative existential movies, but in, well, many disguises.
I think maybe Linklater's realised he's got to Trojan horse the Netflix viewers and get his ideas about psychology and identity in under the guise of a sexy rom-com, which is, the film is that, but it's also, it's an existential film about identity and about performance and about this idea of whether you can just decide to be a completely different person. And that is something that I think only occurs to you after you've got out of the cinema or after the credits have kind of rolled on Netflix and they're trying to make you watch Love is Blind or something instead. I think that...
The impatient algorithm.
Exactly. It's like, no, next one.
Quick,
but I think I've had so much joy out of discussing this film with my friends and with other people who saw it at London Film Festival, at Venice Film Festival. So we've been mulling this over for months now. And this idea of, in our modern world, who do we want to be and is it enough to kind of project that image and the rest will follow is a really interesting one. And I mean, I think Linklater's kind of playing a little practical joke on us with this. I mean, the cats that Gary owns are called Id and Ego. So it's all kind of there, you know, but it's one of the many
hiding
layers.
In plain and furry sight.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's one of the kind of most delightful things about the film is that you can just take it as a straight, quite dark rom-com, or you can get very invested and start mulling it over and have an existential crisis about it, which, you know, I think he would be very happy about.
Have you gone through a process with this film where you started off... Because there is a point in watching it where you go, it's this, they're doing this. Right? Because you do think, oh my God, this is quite a lot's happening all the time.
It's like watching someone drive a car very fast and then taking a very sudden left turn. It definitely goes some places that I didn't expect it to go. And I think just when you think you've got a handle on what is going on in the film, it kind of wrong foots you and you're like, oh, I didn't expect that. Yeah. And it does take some incredibly dark turns, which for people that are kind of familiar with Linklater's work, and especially the film Bernie, which is also based on an article by Skip Hollingsworth, who was the
This was from a film, just for our listeners. Hitman is taken from an article in the Texas Chronicle or
Texas Monthly or Texas Quarterly. It's like I had no idea what this was.
It's a sort of true story from the 90s, isn't it?
Yeah. This guy, Gary, who was an undercover fake hitman, and he would work with the police as a kind of middleman, meeting with these people who wanted to take a hit out, which sounds so implausible, but apparently it was a very real thing. And there's a delightful montage at the end of the film where they show you all of his disguises, which I really enjoyed, because one of the great things in the film is Glen Powell, who plays Gary, putting on all these different personas, and some of them are very obvious kind of references to creepy serial killers of movies past, but others are just kind of like, whose brain did this come up from? And watching it with a full cinema full of people, as I've done twice now, was just the most delightful thing, because everyone is just cackling. And I think Glen Powell, who I've really enjoyed in other films, I loved him in Everybody Wants Some, which was his other...
Yeah, so let's talk about him. So this is a kind of... There's a lot for him to get his teeth into with this role, and he co-wrote it with Richard Linklater, I believe. So,
he did.
Yeah, let's talk about him, because he's just about getting there, and he's on the way up.
Yeah.
But this is, so there's plenty for him to work with here, literally. And then we see all the...
So much.
Yeah, and then we see all the disguises, as you say, in this montage.
Many hats that he's wearing in this film, literally and figuratively.
Yeah,
yes.
So let's talk a bit about Glen Powell's performance, Yeah,
so I mean, obviously, I think the fact he co-wrote it kind of gave him a bit of a leg up, because he's written the role that he was born to play. I think very charming, slightly conniving character. And I think that's one of the things that's been really interesting talking to film about people, is this idea that, is Gary a good person? I would say no, but there's other people that think, oh, this film is glorifying his actions. And I'm like, I don't know about that. But it's a fascinating character.
Yeah.
It is one that I think really stays with you. And Glenn is such a charismatic presence. And anyone that has seen him in the film Set It Up, which was a Netflix rom-com he did, or in Top Gun Maverick, where he plays Hangman, the kind of the Iceman of the 2022 version, he is an incredibly charismatic screen presence, and that is really utilised well in Hitman, I think. But there is that kind of, undercurrent of darkness, and that tension between the two is something that I think increasingly is rare to find in films. And so when you see it, it really scratches an itch in your brain. You're like, even if you can't quite put your finger on what it is, you're like, this is incredibly compelling to me. And I think that it's just such a gift of a role, and hopefully he'll be getting a lot more like it. I think he's a really wonderful actor and so charming to watch on screen. He's going to be in the big screen sequel to Twisters. Very, very imaginative. I wonder if you can guess what the plot is this summer. So he's going to be back on screens very soon. And I think, he's just someone that I'm really excited in where his career goes next, especially if he gets to work with Richard Linklater again, because they seem like such a great...
They seem like buddies.
A dynamic duo,
And they're both Texans, and they've
been friends for a really long time.
I can see how they get on.
Yeah.
One reviewer has talked about how elements of this reminded him of Hitchcock's Vertigo, and there's some of elements in that. And with Glen Powell's performance, he's not quite a simply good guy as Jimmy Stewart or even Cary Grant in some of those movies as well, right? There's something else going on. There is something slightly dark.
Like we say, there is this kind of psychological undercurrent. And I think that one of the most interesting things about the film is kind of unpacking the relationship that develops between Gary and Maddie, who is the girl next door / femme fatale.
Yes.
And I think that obviously the chemistry between Glen Powell and Adria Arjona is like what makes us so invested in that relationship. And maybe is why some people have kind of thought, oh no, it's just a rom-com, because they're so beautiful and so charismatic. And then you think about, wait a second, what's going on? And like you say, it does have a lot of the kind of Hitchcockian, beautiful, helpless woman who might have a more devious side to her.
Yes.
Which is, it's complicated women, complicated men. We love to see it in kind of modern crime cinema. It's just very engaging, I think, and kind of does make you reconsider things that you're seeing on screen after the fact. When I go back and have rewatched it a few times now, you do start to see things in a whole different light when you know how it all ends, which obviously no spoilers for the listeners, but it kind of... It goes some interesting places.
There are some curveballs and forks in the road. And Linklater has said that there is no such thing. This is about the trope of the hitman in films more than in real life, because apparently commercial hitmen hit people, I guess, don't exist.
Yeah.
Right. So this is so funny. This absolutely is something, a gun for hire, a guy that you take out your wife so you can get a new one or whatever you're doing. That doesn't exist. I thought that was based on real life.
Well, this was particularly funny because the film premiered at the Venice Film Festival last autumn, and it was in the kind of milieu alongside David Fincher's The Killer, which is about a hitman. There was another film about a hitman, and I think there was even a third possible film about hit. We were there on the ground, and we couldn't actually keep count of how many films about hitmen there were.
You quickly needed to come up with a collective noun for hitmen.
Exactly. A gaggle of hitmen.
A murder of hitmen.
There we go. But it's very funny that there was this one film, Richard Linklater going, actually, there's no such thing as a hitman.
Yeah.
And it's such a pervasive trope in cinema. And I personally do love a hitman movie. It's a little bit kind of riffing on our fascination as a culture with the idea of murder being that salacious, when really I think... Yeah, it's
a little bit more quotidian.
It probably is a little bit more mundane. And I think personally hitmen probably do exist, but yeah, definitely not in the way that a lot of media presents them.
Yeah.
And although there have been stories of this thing of, going online and ordering a hit on your wife, the fact there have been so many stories of it kind of indicates how rare it is. If this was happening every week, I don't think anyone would be that interested in it.
It's art imitating life. It's life imitating art, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that the internet still is such a strange place. I think that we kind of want to believe it's more dark than maybe it is. I think a lot of people are still just using it for like cat memes.
We talked before we switched on the microphones about, do they make them like this anymore?
Yeah.
And there's something rather lovely about a film that's confident, that's beautifully written, that's slightly self-referential, that is also just a phenomenally good yarn. Yeah, is this like a dying art, I wonder?
I go back and forth
with
on
Linklater
this.
behind in the director's chair, I suppose he can make this kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think Linklater is of a generation where he obviously grew up, watching, probably wasn't alive at the time Vertigo came out, but, those kind of movies obviously had such an impact on him.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a kind of loss of original storytelling in Hollywood. And obviously this is based on a true story, but it still is an original story. And watching the film, was reminded a lot of the Coen brothers' early work, particularly like Raising Arizona, and one of my favourite films of all time, not a Coen brothers film, My Cousin Vinny. And these films that were kind of mid-budget. They weren't super expensive to make, but they had charismatic casts. They had intrigue, they had kind of darker themes, darker elements, and were just a really engaging, adult, intelligent time at the cinema. And I do think that it is something that feels like it's been lost a little bit, or maybe that companies are taking less risks, and even to them, someone like Richard Linklater is a risk, which is crazy because he's made some of the most well-regarded films of the past 50 years of filmmaking, and he had to make the film off his own back with his own independent financing, and then it was bought by Netflix. But it's, he said it's such a struggle to get a film made now, and it really blows my mind as someone who watches a lot of films that someone like Richard Linklater, someone like Ethan Coen can struggle in this manner to get a story made. So hopefully, this film has been so well received. Hopefully he won't struggle as much to get his next one off the ground, because it would be such a shame.
And that is all for this week. My thanks to Hannah Strong there and to Richard Linklater. Hitman is available to watch on Netflix now. Monocle on Culture is produced by Sophie Monaghan-Coombs and Steph Chungu, and Steph also edits the show. Many thanks to Lily Austin for her help editing this episode. We'll be back at the same time next week, but until then, from me, Robert Bound, thanks for tuning in.